everyone. The hour at 10 a.m. having arrived, the House Judiciary Committee will come to order. Secretary, please call the roll.
Chairman Briggs.
Here.
Representatives Carroll.
Designation.
Donahue.
Designation.
Hanbidge.
Designation.
Owenstein.
Designation.
Howard. Kenyatta.
Designation.
Kincaid.
Designation.
Mays.
Designation.
Miller.
Designation.
Sanchez.
Designation.
Schusterman. Chairman Kaufman.
Here.
Representatives Bonner. Horowitz. Ecker.
Designation.
Ham.
Designation.
Kale.
Designation.
Kerwin. Plunk.
Designation.
Kuzma.
Designation.
Ledbetter.
Designation.
Rigby.
Designation.
Shalaba.
Designation.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Just 1 minute. Thank you. For the information of the members, this meeting is being recorded. Please silence your phones and please be respectful to all the testifiers. If you are participating on Teams, I see Representative Sanchez is on Teams. I want to ask a question. Please raise your hand. As a reminder, we do have a voting meeting at 11 a.m. in this same room, so we're going to try to move along fairly quickly. House Bill 632 by Representative Waxman aims to decriminalize HIV in the Commonwealth. I look forward to hearing from the testifiers who have traveled here today to share their time, talents, and experience with us. First up, we will recognize Representative Waxman for some brief comments on his bill, House Bill 632. Representative Waxman, you're in order.
Thank you, and thank you so much, Chairman, for entertaining this hearing this morning. I really appreciate your willingness to do this and to the committee to consider the bill. In Pennsylvania, people who are living with HIV have been prosecuted under laws for their HIV status for conduct that would not normally ordinarily be considered a crime or would be a far less serious crime. For example, prostitution is typically a misdemeanor offense. However, people living with HIV in Pennsylvania who are charged with prostitution can be charged with a felony, even if transmission could not be possible because there was no physical contact that occurred or the nature of the contact was not a method of transmission. This felony enhancement, and what's what it is, it's a felony enhancement, it was enacted in 1995. And since it was enacted, it really has not been much of a tool for law enforcement. It is rarely charged and rarely utilized, and there is no link between harsher penalties for prostitution and a reduction in HIV transmission. So these laws are really a relic of a bygone era. They have not kept up with 4 decades of progress in the fight against HIV or the science. These are just discriminatory laws, and they don't reflect the current science about HIV prevention, transmission, or treatment. And I would underline that this is a law that was acted in 1995 and has not been updated at all since it was acted. Obviously, we know there have been very, very large strides taken in the treatment and prevention of HIV. So my bill, House Bill 632, would eliminate the discriminatory sentencing enhancements for prostitution for those with HIV and also allow for the resentencing for those previously convicted. As I said, this is really a statute that is a bygone era and is not utilized really ever or very, very rarely by law enforcement, which is why I think it's prime to get rid of. I was very pleased to learn that the DA's Association, the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association, is supportive of this bill. Also, which we were grateful to get that support for this legislation. Obviously, that indicates, I think, how at least law enforcement feels that it just isn't a tool that is used very frequently. I just also want to acknowledge that we have had some input as well from the Defenders Association, who do have some tweaks to the resentencing portion of the bill. Just want to put that out there. We're in conversation with them as well. But I just really think that it's time for this legislature to take action to try to remove some of this discriminatory language from our code. And with that, we're excited. I think we have a great panel and take some questions and talk about the bill. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Representative Waxman. So just for the members and the testifiers, each of you will have approximately 10 minutes for some remarks. We will listen to each of you and then open it up some questions from the members. Today I'm going to do a quick introduction of each. Today we're joined by Andrea Johnson, the founder of Girl You Can Do It, Inc., a nonprofit organization specializing in human trafficking, homelessness, HIV/AIDS, and youth mentorship. Thank you for being here. Next is Dr. Jay Kostman, is that correct? Chief Medical Officer of FIGHT, Philadelphia Community Health Centers. Dr. Kostman has been providing care to individuals with HIV in Philadelphia since 1989 and is a frequent speaker for the AIDS Education and Training Center. Next, we are joined by Sean Strub, former mayor of Milford Borough in Pike County, Pennsylvania, and the founder of POZ magazine, a highly respected award-winning resource for individuals living with HIV. Last but not least, we will hear from attorney Rhonda Goldfein, executive director of the AIDS Law Project of Pennsylvania, the nation's only independent public interest law firm dedicated to the individuals living with HIV. Thank you all for being here. Why don't we start with Andrea and then can just go my right to left. You can begin when you're ready. Thank you.
Awesome. Good morning, representatives, and thank you so much for having me. Sure. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Awesome. Good morning, and thank you again for having me. My name is Andrea Johnson. I am a mother, a grandmother, the granddaughter of grandparents that raised me due to my mother dying at a young age. And I'm also present before you as a fierce, bold, and vibrant human living with HIV, a highly stigmatized and barriered virus, as we all know. While my focus in life was raising my kids and helping in my community, I spent most of my career in corporate America. I founded an organization called Girl You Can Do It, Inc., seeking to provide guidance to young individuals to help them to become our successors of tomorrow. As I learned of my then husband's infidelities, my doctor tested me for sexually transmitted infections, including HIV. I never thought I would ever be affected by something called HIV. But on July 10, 2007, I was told that I had contracted HIV. I thought, how? You know, I was healthy, you know, I didn't look the part, which is the part of the stigma. I wasn't, you know, ailing or anything, and my now ex-husband was just as healthy as well. But as we all learned, HIV is contracted through sexually transmission, by being sexually active and having unprotected sex. My idea of how HIV looked was distorted by the images of sickly-looking people. I was like, that can't be me. How could this happen to me was the big thing. Why me? As many as you have heard, I'm sure, that you've spoken to said the same. I had so many hows. How was I going to tell my kids and my family? How was I going to survive? How was I going to keep my employer from finding out? I worked in corporate America. So that to me was very scary because I'm now thinking, how am I going to support my family? Am I going to get sick? There were so many hows. The house stressed me so much, I thought about suicide at one time. I feel like I was just going to die from the stress, the shame, and anxiety of all the stigma that faced me if someone found out. How was I ever going to find true love again? That was another issue. Living with something that could ultimately change my life, that could ultimately change someone else's life as it had did mine. But I say I am a very spiritual woman. By the grace of God, my family, caring doctors, and the knowledge about HIV, as well as learning about the science behind HIV, I was able to defy stigma to help myself and others. I took my medications, controlled my HIV, and stayed healthy. I worked fiercely with Penn Medicine and Drexel College of Medicine to help get youth, persons, and other youth and adults tested in emergency room settings and get them into HIV prevention and care. Removing criminalization of HIV from the law, which House Bill 632 would accomplish, is an important step towards getting rid of stigma and to removing barriers to getting tested and getting people tested and into care for HIV. By voting for House Bill 632 and taking a stand to end stigma, you will be standing on the right side of history. HIV is not a crime. When you look at me, you can't tell that I am HIV positive. You can't tell that I had a struggle, and I continue to have struggles with stigma all around me every day. But due to the fact that I paid attention to the science, I take my medication, and I am fierce at letting people know how not to contract HIV, as well as helping many. When I say many, I'm talking thousands of people to get into care. But when you criminalize a virus such as HIV, it can stop that. People are too afraid to want to get tested, to know their status. So I thank you for listening to me, and I pray that you all will take and approve this bill so that way we can get rid of any criminalization as it relates to HIV. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And stick around. We will possibly ask questions. Dr. Kosman.
Good morning, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you this morning. Thank you for giving us that. I'm Jay Kosman. I am the Chief Medical Officer of Philadelphia Fight Community Health Centers, one of Pennsylvania's largest comprehensive health services organizations that provides primary care, consumer education, clinical and basic research, and advocacy for people living with HIV, as well as those at high risk of acquiring HIV infection. HIV can be transmitted in 3 ways: through blood contact, through intimate sexual contact, and during pregnancy or at the time of delivery. It is nearly impossible to transmit the virus through any other means, including spitting, biting, or contact with bodily fluids. I began providing care to people living with HIV infection in Philadelphia in the late 1980s and continue to do so until today. I've worked in large hospital systems in Philadelphia as well as community health centers. Some of my patients have been living with HIV for more than 35 years at this time. I've participated and continue to do so in clinical research that has led to improved treatments for people living with HIV disease, and collaborate with colleagues who are laboratory scientists who are currently working to develop strategies for curing HIV infection. When I started doing this work, HIV was a universally fatal disease due to ineffective treatment. Because of the vulnerable population in which HIV first appeared, particularly in the United States, there was a lack of empathy for people living with HIV disease that led to great amounts of stigmatization of those people who were living with the virus. And the stigma that is associated, that was and continues to be associated with HIV infection, fueled the epidemic, particularly because it was focused on an already marginalized population. HIV stigma itself discourages people from getting tested, and subsequently, if they are found to be infected, discourages them from being treated for their infection. If people know they could face legal consequences for testing positive for HIV, they may avoid getting tested. In addition, fear of prosecution may prevent individuals from seeking care or disclosing their status to partners, contrary to what the laws are intended to encourage. These fears actually produce the opposite public health effect from what would be expected, and treating and identifying people with HIV infection thus becomes actually more difficult. We now know that when people are taking effective treatment against HIV, which is called antiretroviral treatment, the amount of HIV in their blood is at an undetectable level. There's broad scientific data and understanding that when people reach this undetectable level, they can't transmit the virus to other people. The phrase U equals U, which equates to undetectable equals untransmittable, has been widely used based on a large amount of scientific data. So when people are identified as HIV positive and stay in care and stay healthy, they will not transmit the virus to other people. We should not subject people to laws that were enacted out of fear and reinforce stigma and are not based on our current scientific understanding of a disease. Public health approaches, including education, access to testing and treatment, safer sex measures, support for disclosure and treatment adherence are more effective in preventing HIV infection and building community trust than criminalizing a health condition. Laws that treat HIV as a crime and not as a manageable health condition ignore science, violate human rights, increase stigma, and undermine public health goals for this infection. I thank you for your attention and encourage you to vote for this, this HB 632. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Mayor, when you're ready, you can begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Sean Strube from Milford Borough in the far northeast corner of the state, the county seat of Pike County. I served as Milford's mayor from 2016 until just a couple months ago. I also am a business owner and for 25 years have been involved in Main Street revitalization efforts in Milford and other community activities. And I founded PAUSE, it's pronounced, which is a colloquial for positive or and HIV positive, thinking positively. PAUSE magazine in 1994. And today, about 70% of the people with HIV in the US interact with PAUSE every month. One of the things I say when I speak with groups that, of people who are HIV negative, which I assume most of this audience is that as someone who's been living with HIV for more than 40 years, I'll tell you that HIV stigma today is worse than it has ever been. And people get surprised at that because they remember when they saw the movie Philadelphia and saw Tom Hanks when you had to wear a space suit to see him in the hospital, or people wouldn't touch somebody, or go to a restaurant that they thought might have had a gay waiter or something. By those measures, it's better. But that's fear of casual contagion. That's a fear of people who don't have HIV, of what they're afraid of is contagion. And back then we knew so much less than we know now. But stigma, as experienced by the stigmatized, and this I know about personally. 30 years ago, I weighed 30 pounds less than I do now, maybe 35 pounds less. I was covered in Kaposi's sarcoma, the purple lesions that some people with AIDS get, including in my lungs. I used to joke that I'd walk down the street and little kids would point and dogs would bark and mothers would pull their children close. So I do know stigma. But stigma as experienced by the stigmatized today is more complex. It isn't just about people being afraid of getting it from us. It's about having your moral worth judged before people even know you. It's about having assumptions made about your sexual behaviors, drug use, or other factors. It's about having your words discounted before they even leave your mouth. Marginalization and discrimination, especially with a younger generation, we're far less likely to know people with HIV personally, or, didn't live through the epidemic at the peak in those sense, and are less likely to understand how science has so dramatically changed what it means to have HIV. A person diagnosed today can expect to live a normal lifespan. A person diagnosed today can go on treatment, experience no side effects, and be incapable of transmitting the virus. So it could not be more different than when this law was passed in 1995. And so a lot of this effort is bringing laws up to date with the current science. And one of the problems with the statutes is not only do they drive stigma, because there's nothing more stigmatizing when government makes a law that applies only to one part of society based on an immutable characteristic, whether it's skin color or gender or genetic makeup or physical ability or disability or the virus they carry. But it's also horrible public health policy in very practical ways, discouraging people from getting tested, discouraging people, making people less likely to cooperate with traditional public health infection prevention measures like contact tracing. And there's research on all these things showing how criminalization statutes do this. We've had incredible advances in science. It's enabled me to be here today and others. But we don't have a pill for stigma. Stigma is something much more complex, and it becomes institutionalized in a society, including in part through statutes like this. Pennsylvania's been great in so many ways with the epidemic. This is the last remaining specific reference to HIV in the Pennsylvania Criminal Code, and we're advocating for its removal. That stigma, the obstacle to ending the epidemic today, it isn't the virus, it is the stigma. And that's why the American Medical Association, the American Bar Association, the National Alliance of State and Territorial AIDS Directors, American Psychiatric Association, the National Conference of Mayors, National Association of County and City Health Officials, and many others have issued statements or positions advocating for modernization of these statutes that specifically refer to HIV. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Before council begins, I just want to acknowledge that we were joined by Representative Miller, Representative Ecker, Representative Kincaid, as well as Representative Donahue. Since roll call, I think I got everyone. Rhonda, you can begin.
Good morning. Thank you for your time this morning. I'm Rhonda Goldfein, the Executive Director of the AIDS Law Project of Pennsylvania, the nation's only public interest law firm that provides free legal services to people living with HIV or vulnerable to acquiring it. In the early 90s, deaths related to HIV were at an all-time high in the U.S., and the federal Ryan White Comprehensive AIDS Resources Emergency Act was passed to provide funding for HIV treatment and prevention. But in a misguided attempt to prevent HIV transmission, the act required states seeking funding to demonstrate that they could prosecute anyone living with HIV who intentionally exposed another person. Now, even though all states already have laws that punish those who harm others, Pennsylvania and many states wanted to be sure that they received the vital funding to provide care to their residents, so they passed HIV-specific laws that initiate or enhance charges against people living with HIV. Since that effort in the 90s, when the CARE Act required these criminalization laws, there have been several amendments to the CARE Act, specifically in 2000, that removed the requirement that HIV criminalization laws exist, yet the laws remain. Over the years, the Pennsylvania legislature has removed all but one reference to HIV in the criminal code. HB 632 would remove the final reference, which is the felony enhancement for prostitution with HIV. This enhancement has never served an effective law enforcement purpose. In the 30 years since its enactment, it's rarely been charged, and there's no credible research that says that these harsher penalties correlate with a reduction in HIV transmission. A September 2023 poll from Susquehanna Polling and Research shows that a majority of Pennsylvanians believe that the state's HIV laws should be updated to reflect current science. According to the poll, 76% of Pennsylvanians believe that current HIV laws should be modernized and updated. And 79% believe that people living with HIV should receive the treatment and services they need rather than face criminal charges that discriminate and discourage proper testing, treatment, and disclosure. In the AIDS Law Project's 37 years, we have provided free legal services on 50,000 legal matters to more than 25,000 people living with HIV. And we regularly hear from our clients how stigma impedes their lives, dissuades them from seeking health care, or even sharing their diagnosis with others. To remove stigma, we need to root it out wherever it can be found, including in outdated legislation that doesn't protect anyone. Voting for HB 632 and removing stigmatizing language from the criminal code won't create any gaps in the laws that protect Pennsylvanians. Stigma protects no one. Instead, it endangers public health. Removing HIV stigma from the PA criminal code protects us all. I ask that you vote yes on HB 632. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Waxman, do you have any closing? We can just go to questions.
No, we can go to questions.
Okay.
Unless you're desperate to hear a closing from me.
Well, we're going quick, so I figured we might as well, you were brief earlier. Any questions from the members? Chairman Kaufman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm interested in statistics as well as maybe anecdotes on how this law has been prosecuted and how many times it's been prosecuted over the years, and what circumstances, what were the initial crimes, and then obviously the grading.
We know from data compiled by the Office of Courts that since 1995, this law has been charged 47 times. We further know that from 2017 to 2021, it's been charged 27 times. Of those 27 charges, 25 of them were dismissed. There were 2 counts remaining.
And what was the situation of the crime? Maybe the 2 that have not been dismissed. Do you know I suspect you know the story behind them.
I can't say with certainty. I mean, at the AIDS Law Project, we have heard from people who were concerned about this crime, but I can't say with certainty what those 2 remaining charges are. I know with certainty that neither of them were the result of somebody being infected with HIV. And so I guess our point is that we don't need a law that punishes this kind of theoretical risk, this possibility of harm, because we actually have laws that punish if there's actual harm. So we look at this law as just an add-on that increases stigma, but doesn't get to any real goal of protecting folks.
So, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, in addition to that, the CERO project, which has been working on this issue for a number of years, filed over 3,000 right-to-know requests with prosecutorial districts all over the country, seeking information about HIV-specific cases in their statutes. It documented almost 3,000 cases. Of those, way less than 5%, maybe only 1%, actually involved HIV transmission. These charges are not about whether there's transmission or not. So that was the one point I want to make. The other, that I think sometimes people think this is about people with HIV, and one of the things I say when I'm talking to people is, you know, this bill and other modernization bills we've worked on across the country will make it, if you have children, it will make it less likely that your child would be subject to acquiring HIV because it would facilitate the testing, it would facilitate addressing the epidemic in the ways it needs to be to make it go away.
So I'm still curious because I'm not necessarily able to understand, again, what was the original crime?
Yeah.
Because we're talking, the vagueness in which this is being talked about is acting as though we're grabbing someone off the street and criminalizing them because they have HIV. So what was the original crime, and what was the circumstance in which these folks were prosecuted?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question, and just so you're clear, you know, what we have in Pennsylvania is that this is a felony enhancement, so it's an enhancement on top of prostitution. So if someone is engaging in sex work, if they're engaging in prostitution, they can get an additional, and they are arrested, charged, they can get an additional enhancement up to a felony level under current statute. It only applies to prostitution cases, and so does that clarify? Those are the situations in which this is being.
Yeah,
and as far as I know, it's the only type of enhancement that exists for our prostitution statute. It's the only. I mean, so.
Yeah, I think that's important because for those folks, I mean, there are a few strange folks out in TV land who watch us on PCN. They would literally have no idea what we're talking about because we've circled the wagons about criminalizing HIV, but they don't know what the original crime is. So I think that's important for everyone to understand the entirety of the conversation. And not just we're plucking people off the street and you're being charged with a felony because you have HIV, because that is what they would have thought if we hadn't entered into this discourse. Thank you.
Okay.
Representative Schusterman.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank the maker of the bill. I think this is long overdue. I also want to thank Andrea and Sean for sharing their stories. As someone who's 57 years old, I recall how many people with HIV did not survive, and it's really a testament to science that where we are now. And I agree with the, this is more a comment than a question, and I don't know if you have any statistics from other states regarding how that next generation will be, be more likely when they go to their doctor to get tested for AIDS, so they can learn about preventative measures as well as get started on the course of treatment as early as possible. Is there any statistics that any of our panelists have from other states? Thank you.
We can certainly provide statistics on HIV testing rate. I wanted to add that in terms of this felony enhancement for prostitution, Pennsylvania is only one of 9 states that still have the enhancement. So all the other states have modernized.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Ecker, you're in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about the impetus of how this originally, the HIV legislation that kind of came about. Someone had mentioned about how there was a federal law that I guess required this. What happened to the federal law? I missed that part. What happened to the federal law? Is this something that's still in place, or?
So the federal law, the Ryan White Care Act, named after the cute boy in Kokomo, Indiana, that we've all seen, that law, that act, required states to demonstrate that they could punish people for intentionally exposing someone to HIV. And so many states, Pennsylvania among them, developed laws that had these sentence enhancements, or that HIV was singled out in the criminal code. Over time, those laws in many states have fallen away. In Pennsylvania, all but the remaining one, the felony enhancement for prostitution, has fallen away. And in fact, an amendment to the original federal act in 2000 no longer required that that be included. So the requirement was gone, but the relic of the requirement remains.
So the federal law is still in. I get
no.
what you're saying. The federal law still is intact, but you're saying that the incentive or whatever you want to call it for states to pass legislation has been removed.
The Ryan White Care Act is still in effect. That provision that states demonstrate they were able to prosecute intentional transmission is no longer part of it. And in addition to that, the Justice Department and the Center for Disease Control issued a joint paper to states' attorneys general on advice on how to modernize their statutes.
And I would just add to that, I think it's important for us to just be cognizant of the fact that there are lots of tools for law enforcement that exist in our current criminal code, more general statutes like risking a catastrophe, randomly endangering another person. I mean, there are tools that exist for law enforcement if these are the paths that they want to go down without stigmatizing one particular illness, one particular type of transmission or whatever. So I think that it's just important that we just be aware that, of course, our law enforcement still has the tools that they would need, if they felt that the situation required that it be handled in such a manner.
One quick follow-up, please. Was the original federal law, was there like financial dollars attached to it? What incentivized states to do that?
The requirement that states demonstrate that they could pass laws like this was part of the requirement to receive federal money to provide care and treatment to people living with HIV. So there was a very large incentive to pass those laws.
And is that funding still, do states still receive that funding?
Yes, those of us who provide HIV care services like myself and Dr. Kostman, our offices are greatly dependent on those federal programs.
So I'd also point out, going back to the initial context, in the mid and late 80s, there was a very serious effort to pass bills to quarantine people with HIV. And in some cases, the HIV criminalization statutes were sort of a compromise to ward that off. It also, at the time, many people believed that any kind of contact with a person with HIV constituted exposure. That's the language in the law. Now, exposure takes a lot more than that. So that has changed as well. And in terms of prosecutions of people who actually were intending to harm another person, and as Rhonda said, we have criminal assault statutes. Whether somebody uses a chair or a gun or a knife, they can be prosecuted. But the number of cases in the country of people who are proven to have intended to transmit the virus to another, it's a handful. And they include bizarre cases like, a physician in Mississippi who, injected a newborn because he didn't want to pay, child support or something. They're like weird cases. Just so rare that there's ever that kind of intent from one person to transmit it to another.
I appreciate the testimony today, and again, this is a difficult issue because I think I recognize why this is probably one of the last things we've tackled, because we are talking about it's tied to another offense with prostitution, which obviously deals with if someone with HIV is in that situation. I can understand why this is a sensitive issue, but I appreciate the conversation today, and thanks for the testimony.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Kincaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize, I was a little bit late, so if we're retreading some stuff. But I wanted to sort of do a follow-up to Chair Kaufman's question. When it comes to the actual sentence of what folks who are charged with prostitution and then face this enhancement, what is the change in terms of what the punishment would be if they were charged only with prostitution, and how much time or how much punishment they would be facing with this enhancement?
So it would be the difference between being charged with a misdemeanor, which could be punishable up to 90 days, to being charged with a felony of a year, of a punishment of a year or more.
So it's a third-degree felony.
I believe, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I will confirm the grading of the felony.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions for the panelists? Representative Miller, you're on order.
Thank you. In relation to the states where this enhancement no longer exists, what, if anything, has been noted from the HIV rates when the enhancement is gone?
There have been no links to any credible evidence that show that HIV transmission increases when the criminalization is removed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm looking at Representative Bonner. You're always game for something interesting. Ben, do you have any closing comments?
Just to say, I just want to appreciate the time and the attention of the committee. We really appreciate folks, being here this morning and participating in the hearing, and grateful to all the folks who made the trip up here from different parts of the state to participate. And I would imagine folks will probably be here in their district offices from people as well, and we look forward to continuing to advocate around this bill. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Representative. I also want to thank everyone for coming out and spending time with us to share your stories and your expertise. It definitely helps in the lawmaking aspect, thinking about issues that aren't always kind of at the forefront of public debate. But this has been an interesting morning. Before I adjourn, we do have a voting meeting at 11. So we will, that is a scheduled 11 a.m. start time. So we do have to wait till then to start voting. And we will take a little bit break. This hearing is adjourned. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. The House Judiciary voting meeting will come to order. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Chairman Briggs,
Here.
Representatives Carroll,
Designation.
Donahue, Hanbidge,
Designation.
Hohenstein,
Designation. Oh, here. I'm sorry.
Howard, Kenyatta,
Designation.
Kincaid, Mays,
Designation.
Miller,
Designation.
Bielli, Rab,
Designation.
Sanchez, Schusterman. Chairman Kaufman,
Here.
Representatives Bonner, Borowitz, Ecker, Ham,
Designation.
Kale,
Designation.
Kerwin, Clunk,
Designation.
Kuzma,
Designation.
Ledbetter,
Designation.
Rigby, Schlaba.
Designation.
Mr. Chairman, a quorum is present.
Thank you, Secretary. Having a quorum, we will proceed with today's business. First, on the agenda, the chair will call up House Bill 331. Council Vitale, please provide a summary of the bill.
Mr. Chairman, House Bill 331, introduced by Chairman Briggs, provides funding for Pennsylvania legal aid. The bill accomplishes this by deleting an exception in Title 42, Section 3733.1. The bill takes effect in 60 days, and there are no amendments.
Thank you, Council. The question is, will the committee report the bill, House Bill 331? Are there any comments on the bill? Chairman Kaufman on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly do recognize and believe this is an issue worthy of conversation. I do believe our side of the aisle shares some concern that this is not, the way it is being funded is certainly not a user fee. There are, I mean, if you get a traffic citation, the pile-on of fees and charges are rather cumbersome. And so, you know, at this point, I don't believe we're prepared to support it, but I leave the option open to, be made a yes at some point in the future, because I certainly do believe that our legal aid system is in need of funding, and that should be a discussion here during this season.
Thanks, Chairman Kaufman, for keeping the door open. Any comments or questions on the bill? I think we did vote this out last session. There was a lot of conversation about the similar concerns about the way we fund a lot of our providers. I think legal aid is under a severe threat of being defunded, especially with the federal government actions that will really hurt their funding coming from the federal government. I think someone else have a question? No, you go right. So I do strongly hope people consider voting yes, and doors open to having continued conversations in the future, but funding legal aid is something that I think must be addressed this year. Secretary, please call the roll.
Chairman Briggs,
Yes.
Representatives Carroll,
Designation, yes.
Donahue, Hanbidge,
Designation, yes.
Hohenstein, Howard, Kenyatta,
Designation, yes.
Kincaid, Mays,
Designation, yes.
Miller,
Designation, yes.
Bielli, Rab,
Designation, yes.
Sanchez, Schusterman. Chairman Kaufman,
No.
Representatives Bonner, Borowitz, Ecker, Ham,
Designation, no.
Kale,
Designation, no.
Kerwin, Clunk,
Designation, no.
Kuzma,
Designation, no.
Ledbetter,
Designation, no.
Rigby, Schlaba.
Designation, no.
This bill passes, a vote of 14 to 12.
Thank you, Secretary. House Bill 331 passes and will be reported as committed. Next on the agenda is House Bill 808 by Representative Kozak. The chair will first recognize Representative Kozak for some brief remarks on the bill, and then go to our council. Representative, you are in order. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for bringing this bill up, and thank you to the members of the Judiciary Committee for hearing me. My bill amends Title 42 to remove the statute of limitations for certain crimes that are committed against a nonverbal care-dependent person. I decided to introduce this legislation after learning of abuse that occurred at a respected residential facility in my district, resulting in the death of Nicholas Maravich and another in 2017. Nicholas, who was a nonverbal and care-dependent individual, had been abused by a staff member, but was unable to communicate that anything was wrong. He and another victim died of pneumonia after developing an infection caused when they aspirated water that the abuser threw into their faces. The abuse of Nicholas was later discovered when photographs and videos were found on the perpetrator's cell phone while police were investigating an unrelated rape case involving the residential facility employee. The photographs and videos revealed despicable and depraved acts by two staff members, such as throwing items at the head of a residence, jumping on a resident, assaulting an individual in their sleep, and placing one screaming victim in a lift. During the criminal trial, the families of the nonverbal victims were shocked to learn that the former caretakers were being charged with lesser crimes because the statute of limitations had run out. Thankfully, the federal government stepped in and prosecuted the individuals with hate crimes. This legislation will eliminate the statute of limitations for some of the most serious crimes when they are committed against a nonverbal care-dependent person. Specifically, these crimes include rape, involuntary deviant sexual assault, simple assault, aggravated assault, and abuse or neglect of a care-dependent individual. Under this legislation, a nonverbal care-dependent person is defined as an individual who is 18 years of age or older and who, due to a physical or cognitive disability or impairment, requires assistance to meet their needs for food, shelter, clothing, personal care, or health care, and also has significantly sub-average intellectual function that is accompanied by significant limitations in the adaptive function of communication. It's imperative that we adequately protect nonverbal, care-dependent persons who are victims of crime. I understand the purpose of having a statute of limitations for crimes, and philosophically believe them to be necessary in many of the cases they are put into place for. But because of the significant limitations that nonverbal care-dependent individuals have in their ability to express or communicate that they have been victimized, as this story that I just told you so clearly demonstrates, I believe removing the statute of limitations in this context is both appropriate and necessary. The Commonwealth must continue to ensure that the most vulnerable individuals among us receive justice under the law, and that those who prey on them are prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I ask members to please vote yes for HB 808, which I'm calling Nicholas's Law, in memory of Nicholas and the victims that suffered at the hands of these despicable and evil acts. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. If you could just stay there, I think there's going to be some questions for you in a few minutes. Council Vitale, I know it was a great description. Anything?
Mr. Chairman, the bill takes effect in 60 days and there are no amendments.
Great. Thank you. The question is, will the committee report the bill? Are there comments on the bill? Representative Hohenstein has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Representative. I'm going to step. Thank you very much for bringing this bill forward, and definitely appreciate the experience of Nicholas and his family as well. I just have a question, which is, in preparing this bill, what were the organizations or folks that you worked with or discussed the bill with? And I say that from the perspective of someone who always tries to work with the disability community in crafting bills that they themselves want and not just coming up with solutions from outside.
Sure. I appreciate that. Thank you. So I didn't work with any specific organizations. I worked with the family. Well, the family reached out to me about this bill. This was a relative of Nicholas's that reached out to me. I also spoke with some individuals. I don't want to be too specific just for the purposes of privacy, but individuals that were directly involved in the case that approached me and thanked me for putting this bill out there. I haven't heard, from any other organizations outside of that. Till briefly last night, I received an email from someone, but other than that, it's just been me with the family's word and encouragement from those who are involved in the case.
And I certainly really appreciate that. I plan on voting yes on this bill, and I do appreciate you bringing it forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I know some of our members have talked to some of the advocacy groups, and some have communicated to us some suggestions on language. But Representative Kincaid, do you have a comment?
Thank you. Actually, I did speak to folks who work in the disability community, and one of the concerns that they raised about this bill was that it specifically identifies nonverbal individuals rather than just broadly saying care-dependent individuals. And their concern is that it would continue the narrative that people who are nonverbal are of a lower IQ, that they don't actually have the ability to speak for themselves merely because they are nonverbal. And so that is a concern, and I think it's a valid one, and I will be voting yes today, but I would like to work with you on an amendment to address that.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Any other comments or questions on the bill before we go to a roll call? Well, are there any negative votes that would require a roll call? Seeing none, if the Secretary could please report it as a unanimous vote. Congratulations, and looking forward to helping some of the conversation if we need some assistance on drafting an amendment. The House Bill 808 passes and will be reported as committed to the Speaker. Thank you,
Thank
Representative.
you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
We're going to go a little bit out of order, right? Just our next prime sponsor is en route. I'm going to be calling up House Bill 1412 by Representatives Schusterman and Hanbidge. The chair will recognize Representative Schusterman for brief comments or remarks on the bill. You're in order.
Thank you, Chairman. So courts right now are getting bogged down with frivolous and repeated, per se, self-representative custody modification filings that should not be utilizing the court's resources. Often there are arguments over homework, vacation locations, haircuts, etc. So in the past, when parents who were divorcing used attorneys to represent them, the attorneys were, they kind of gatekeep the case and made sure unnecessary filings were out of court. So with the increase of self-representation and repeated and frequent court filing, the judges, which I worked with, are seeking the assistance of the legislature to revise the language and create a fair and balanced method to manage custody modification filings. Basically, people who are representing themselves are going in court and then filing again, going in court and filing again. And this law would streamline that and not allow someone to file unless there was a change in circumstance. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. This was you and Representative Hanbidge did this. I don't see Representative Hanbidge here. But Council, anything to add?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The bill requires a petitioner to demonstrate a material change in circumstance when filing for a custody order modification. Importantly, the court maintains discretion to consider a modification petition if they determine a modification is in the best interest and safety of the child. Failure to demonstrate a material change of circumstance may result in the dismissal of the party's petition. Custody orders entered prior to the effective date of this paragraph shall be modifiable without the necessity of demonstrating a material change The bill takes effect in 60 days, and there are no amendments.
Thank you, council. The question is, will the committee report the bill? Are there any comments on the bill? Recognizing Representative Ecker on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll address this to Representative Schusterman or council. When looking at the material change, and just so I'm clear here, would it be that the court would have to run through the best interest factors to determine that? Is that what this legislation is seeking to do before? How are we defining material change, I guess?
Representative Ecker, I think it's based on the facts and circumstance as presented in the petition to the judge.
And would they have to, I mean, it seems to me they would have to evaluate the best interest factors likely, but is that the intent here, or is this really going to be discretion of the court? Because I think the standard right now might be substantial change, I believe.
Mr. Chairman, is there a question? Yeah, the standard will be a material change, and the judge will make the determination based on the facts and circumstances provided for in the modification petition.
Okay. Thank you. Just on the bill, real quick, I appreciate the makers and what they're attempting to do here. I guess I'm just trying to understand what a material change is, or how we're going to define that. But ultimately, it sounds like it's going to be the court's discretion. So thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Representative. Any additional comments on the bill? I mean, I think Representative Schusterman is addressing an issue that came up at a hearing we had with the PA Bar Association practitioners and members of the bench on the custody factor conversation. And this was a kind of a sideline of concerns that were coming up. So I want to thank Representative Schusterman for spending almost the last year drafting this with a number of stakeholders that I find to be very helpful in putting this type of language together, and looking forward to advancing it to the floor. Are there negative votes on this? Secretary, please call the roll.
Chairman Briggs,
Yes.
Representatives Carroll,
Could we do the Democratic fast track? If
Yes.
that's, so all the Democrats will be yes.
Okay.
Chairman Kaufman. You can start with Chairman Kaufman.
Chairman Kaufman,
Yes.
Representatives Bonner, Orwitz, Ecker, Ham,
Yes.
Kale,
Yes.
Kerwin, Clunk,
Yes.
Kuzma,
Yes.
Ledbetter,
Yes.
Rigby, Shalaba.
Yes.
This bill passes, a vote of 25 to 1.
House Bill 1412 passes and will be reported to the floor as committed. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we will be calling up House Bill 1344 by Representative
Armanini?
Armini. I'm sorry. I thought there's an extra syllable in there. Armanini. Armanini.
Good Irish name.
The chair recognizes the representative for remarks. Representative, you're in order. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chairman Briggs, Chairman Kaufman, and committee members. I rise today to respectfully request everyone's support of House Bill 1344. My bill establishes K-9 training and certification standards for police officers of K-9 units to detect fentanyl. Fentanyl is involved in the majority of opiate-related overdose deaths in Pennsylvania. In 2022, 5,169 deaths were attributed to the overdose in Pennsylvania. Of those deaths, fentanyl and other synthetic opioids were involved in 71% of total overdose deaths, surpassing all other drugs. In 2022, fentanyl was involved in more overdose deaths than any other drug. Fentanyl being involved in overdose deaths is a concerning trend that is increasing. As by 2023, there were 4,721 overdose deaths, and 76% of those overdose deaths involved fentanyl. These alarming statistics highlight the severity of the fentanyl crisis in Pennsylvania. We can endeavor in our efforts to reduce this crisis through the awareness of the dangers of fentanyl. However, we need to ensure our law enforcement are properly equipped to identify and take this dangerous substance off the streets through the training of canines to detect fentanyl. We have the opportunity to assist our law enforcement to establish training and certification standards for canines in the detection of fentanyl through supporting House Bill 1344. By way of example, in Wyoming, developed and implemented training standards for canines to detect fentanyl. Wyoming has success not only in training, but in results of training. For example, a dog named Jagger helped a trooper seize more than 1,300 fentanyl pills, and a dog named April helped a trooper seize 2,100 fentanyl pills, with just in 3 months of the implementation of the training and certification standards. To take just one pill off the streets does make a difference. With the help of specially trained canines, we can stem the amount of fentanyl that is making its way into the neighborhoods and harming our residents and constituents. We can make the difference by supporting this legislation and assist in the prosecution of these distributing this deadly substance in our communities. I respectfully request your support and for affirmative vote on this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Armanini. Council, any additional description of the bill needed?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The bill requires MOPAC to collaborate with the state police, local police department, canine units, and establish training and certification standards by consulting with experts that train canines, as well as medical professionals and veterinarians. The bill takes effect in 60 days. There are no amendments.
Thank you, Council. The question is, will the committee report the bill, House Bill 1344? Are there any comments on the bill? I just have one, and I want to thank you for bringing this up, and we had a good conversation a few weeks ago about the background on this, and you did a great job today. I do think we did hear from some folks who would be implementing this with some suggestions. I'm going to recommend that we advance it today, but have a conversation in the future about potential tweaks to the language about implementation and all. So I just want to flag that. But are there any negative votes on House Bill 1344? I don't see any negative votes. If the Secretary could please report it as a unanimous vote. House Bill 1344 passes and will be reported as committee. Congratulations and thank you for your good work on this bill.
Thank you very much.
I am going to jump to House Bill 1511, and then we're going to do House Bill 994 after that. By myself and Representative Curran, I've been working on House Bill 1511. I'm going to recognize Representative Curran for remarks on the bill. You're in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk on this bill, HB 1511. As a former prosecutor, I know that unsolved crimes, especially unsolved homicides and other violent crimes, can cause the public to lose trust in our criminal justice system and processes that we have here in Pennsylvania. I find this fact really tragic, but there are thousands of unsolved homicides just here in Pennsylvania, including dozens in Harrisburg. HB 1511, the Victim Act, helps law enforcement to solve these violent crimes and have the tools that they need to solve these violent crimes and ultimately bring dangerous criminals to justice. Enacting the Victim Act, HB 1511, will ensure increased clearance rates for violent crimes, including homicides. And that means that these clearance rates will create safer communities in Pennsylvania, hold criminals accountable, build trust in our law enforcement, and ultimately will have a deterrent effect on would-be violent criminals who would commit these heinous crimes in the Commonwealth. I'd ask the committee for a yes vote on this bill, and thank you again, Chairman Briggs, for the opportunity to work with you on this important initiative.
Sorry, thank you, Representative. Council, any additional description on the bill?
Mr. Chairman, the bill takes effect in 60 days, and there are no amendments.
Great, thank you. Is there any comments on the bill in front of us? Representative Horowitz.
Yes, I have a question. Is there any statutory language providing for our constitutional right in the Second Amendment and protections in this bill, quote, the, quote, Victim Act? I don't see any protections for our constitutional right, and this involves a lot of new technology with AI.
I don't know if that's a question, but
Mr. Chairman, the bill doesn't affect the Second Amendment.
Okay, well, gun owner privacy, let me see, limitations on data retention. Is there any kind of restrictions on that with law-abiding gun owners?
this bill's pretty clearly about trying to solve violent crimes. So there's not going to be limitations on the efforts of our prosecutors to be trying to solve violent crimes.
Right,
So,
well, as I researched this with Congressman Dwight Evans, it's a bigger picture of gun control legislation that they're trying to push federally, which you guys are now pushing at the state level. So yes, this is a bigger picture of new technology used through AI to ultimately circumvent the Second Amendment and our constitutional rights. So I have a lot of concerns with
Yeah.
it.
Are there any other comments?
We have to be very careful with these bills because with new technology with AI and Democrats, you know, disguising this as, quote, a victim act. I see with Congressman Dwight Evans in the federal level that he's using this as a, quote, gun violence program, which is a bigger picture of gun control. So I have a lot of concerns. So, thank you.
Any other comments or questions on the bill? Representative Kincaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess I guess it's a question maybe for council. So this bill would allow prosecutors to track information about firearms used in the commission of violent crime.
Mr. Chairman, the bill doesn't limit, it provides an opportunity for these law enforcement agencies to apply for a grant, and if they choose to use it for that purpose, it's their prerogative in fighting and clearing these violent offenses that we're trying to get cleared.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess fundamentally, it's allowing prosecutors to have access to tools that would allow them to prosecute non-law-abiding gun owners or users in that capacity?
Mr. Chairman, my presumption is that law enforcement is going after people that are breaking the law. I don't think their purpose of this grant program is to go after law-abiding citizens.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I mean, the really good part of Representative Kerr and my Bill 1511 is the reporting back to the legislature. What, you know, we're providing the outline for PCCD to create a grant program, and then report back to the chairs of the Judiciary, the chairs of appropriations each year what the funds are being used for. So this whole, you know, I'm not going to get down the rabbit hole here, but it's a good bill to help protect our communities, get these crimes solved. I think that'll be the biggest deterrent for future actors, is knowing that the risk of them getting caught and convicted are being increased. So I think that this is a more successful approach, evidence-based approach than reinforcing and adding sentences and all. We're actually letting people get convicted of crimes that they commit. And Secretary, please call the roll.
Chairman Briggs?
Yes.
Representatives Carroll,
Yeah, designation, yes.
Donahue, Hanbidge,
Designation, yes.
Hohenstein, Howard, Kenyatta, Kincaid, Mays,
Designation, yes.
Miller,
Designation, yes.
Pielli, Rab,
Designation, yes.
Sanchez, Schusterman, Chairman Kaufman,
Yes.
Representatives Bonner, Horwitz, Ecker, Ham,
No.
Kale,
Yes.
Kerwin, Clunk,
Yes.
Kuzma,
Yes.
Ledbetter, Rigby, Shalaba.
Yes.
This bill passes a vote of 24 to 2. Thank you, Secretary. House Bill 1511 passes and will be reported as committed. Final on our agenda is House Bill 994 by Representative Kruger. I will recognize Representative Kruger for remarks on the bill and then allow for Council Vitale to provide any additional description needed. And then stay in the seat, Representative Kruger, in case there's questions from the members, you'll be ready to answer. Representative Kruger, you are in order to address the bill.
Chairman Briggs, Chairman Kaufman, members of the Judiciary Committee, thank you so much for considering House Bill 994 today. This is a bill that I've been working on for some time, and we've done significant stakeholder work to get to the point where we are today. Simply put, this bill would prohibit the sale, an offer for sale or possession with the intent to sell covered animal parts or products. This is an anti-wildlife trafficking bill. The goal of this bill is to stop the sale within Pennsylvania's borders of parts and products of endangered and imperiled species and ensure that Pennsylvania residents do not contribute to the illegal wildlife trade. State sales bans supplement the federal laws and regulations, and they're particularly important if we're going to end the trade in the United States if there are no markets left for products. Each year, as many as 15,000 elephants are killed in Africa to supply the demand for ivory. This is just one of the covered species that would be covered in this bill. The goal is to support the existing federal laws and regulations that restrict the import, export, or interstate trade of products from endangered and threatened species, but they do not currently regulate sales within a state. So this is simply extending those protections within Pennsylvania to try to cut down on harm to elephants, giraffes, and many of the other species covered in this bill. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Council Vitale, anything to add?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The bill provides exceptions for federal and state government employees and agents undertaking law enforcement activities expressly authorized by federal law, and there is an exception for antiques and musical instruments. The bill also allows the Game Commission to permit the purchase or sale of covered animal parts or products for educational or scientific purposes. The bill takes effect in 6 months, and there are no amendments.
Thank you, Council. The question is, will the committee report the bill, House Bill 994? Are there any comments on the bill? Representative Kerwin.
Thank you,
On the
Mr.
bill.
Chairman. I just have a brief question. Does anything in this bill restrict the ability of law-abiding sportsmen and women to import lawfully taken trophies from overseas, from another country, into the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
Mr. Chairman, the bill specifically requires or prohibits the sale or the intention to sell. Someone who brings a product in or a game animal that they harvested in a foreign country, presumably they're not bringing in it to sell, so I don't think this covers that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions, Representative Kenyatta?
Thank you so much. Thank you for doing this and for your work on this. I'm just curious about like the animals that are not covered in this. It's a list of 24. It seems pretty expansive, but I'm also thinking about like eagles, for example. Like, how did you get to this list?
Yes, so this is part of the stakeholder work that we did last session and into this session, in particularly with the Philadelphia Zoo and the Pittsburgh Zoo, and working with the Humane Society of Pennsylvania. The list is the most comprehensive that we've seen, looking again at the laws that have passed in other states. These are the animals that are most at risk for trafficking, for poaching. So for those who haven't read the bill, baleen whale, bonobo, cheetah, chimpanzee, dolphin, elephant, giraffe, gorilla, hippopotamus, jaguar, leopard, lion, mammoth, because mammoth tusks are often, folks are told it's mammoth when it's actually ivory from an elephant. Mastodon, same reason. Orangutan, panda, pangolin, polar bear, ray, rhinoceros, sea turtle, shark, tiger, and walrus. So again, these are the animals that are most at risk currently. In the work that we've done with stakeholders, this is the list that they came up with, and we feel like it's pretty expansive.
Okay, good. Well, thank you, and thank you for your, your consistent work on this. Appreciate it.
We are going to go to Representative Borowitz for a comment, or hopefully comment.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you tell me how many instances products have been sold, or times they've been sold in Pennsylvania specifically?
So we actually have a press conference with Humane PA on Wednesday unveiling the results of a new investigation. It is significant, and that is why we are pushing this bill. Humane PA will be providing the results of their latest investigation again on Wednesday.
There's 15,000 worldwide, so I was just wondering the amount in Pennsylvania. Also, I want to just make note that you can also defund the University of Pittsburgh that is actually selling baby body parts, which Democrats don't seem to care about that. Thank you, Chairman.
Representative Schusterman on the bill.
Thank you, Chairman. I really want to thank the maker of the bill. As the founder of the Animal Protection Caucus and co-chair of the Animal Protection Caucus, this bill has been around for over 10 years, and it's great to see such a comprehensive list, because if we do not incentivize, if we do not allow this type of sale to go through Pennsylvania, we are going to be able to preserve these animals in their natural habitat for future generations. And I also love how this bill does include that these animal parts can be used for education, because that is, part of our robust zoo culture, where they're going into different schools and educating kids about animals. And so I think bill is much improved from last session, and I thank you again for bringing this to Judiciary.
And thank you for your leadership on the annual Animal Protection Caucus. Again, I said we've done significant stakeholder work. So the language to allow permitted for educational or scientific purposes by a bona fide or scientific institution if the covered animal part or product was legally acquired was language added after last session through conversations with stakeholders.
Thank you, Representative. Chair Kaufman on the bill.
And just to clarify, this is the sale of these animal products within Pennsylvania, because the interstate commerce is already prohibited federally, correct?
Yes, so there's federal regulations, but they do not have oversight on sales within Pennsylvania. So this is sale of a covered animal part, covered animal being one of the species that I listed in the bill within Pennsylvania.
And the civil penalties rather than criminal penalties was part of stakeholder conversations, I assume?
That is correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other comments? Representative Bonner on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. Can you explain why sharks were included and whether these are endangered subspecies of sharks?
Thank you for the question. So when we talk about poaching, often we think again about elephants or rhinos whose horns are cut off or tusks are cut off and they're left to die. But the same thing is happening with sharks right now. Sharks are pulled out of the water, their fins are cut off, they're thrown back in alive. They can't survive. Shark fins are used in some cultures as a potential aphrodisiac. And so sharks are becoming at risk because of that practice.
Any other comments or questions? I always like to hear quick questions from Representative Bonner. Yes. Now, are there any negative votes on House Bill 994 that would require a roll call? Yes? Yes. Secretary, please call the roll. Before that, thank you for your hard work on this, Representative. I know we were trying to get to this last session, and you took a step back and really dug in and addressed a lot of stakeholder feedback and made your bill much better. So I want to thank you for that leadership. Secretary, please call the roll.
Chairman Briggs,
Yes.
Representatives Carroll,
Designation, yes.
Donahue, Hanbidge,
Designation, yes.
Hohenstein, Howard, Kenyatta, Kincaid, Mays,
Designation, yes.
Miller,
Designation, yes.
Yelly, Rab,
Designation, yes.
Sanchez, Schusterman, Chairman Kaufman,
Yes.
Representatives Bonner, Orowitz, Ecker,
Designation, yes.
Ham,
Designation, yes.
Kale,
Designation, yes.
Kerwin, Clunk,
Designation, yes.
Kuzma,
Designation, yes.
Ledbetter, Rigby, Shalaba.
Designation, yes.
This bill passes a vote of 25 to 1.
Thank you, Secretary. House Bill 994 passes and will be reported as committed. This meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.